In CSS, there's something called specificity. As you get deeper into coding a website, your CSS files become large, sometimes very large. The larger they become, the higher the chance you have of running into problems. So there's something that I like to call the specificity rule. The more specific, higher priority. Now let's jump into what that means. For example, CSS means cascading style sheets. The styles cascade down the document. So check this out. Here are two H1 styles. Imagine this was a style sheet. The first one says background black, and the second style for the H1, a totally separate style rule, says background white. So in this example, the latter style is applied to the H1 because it comes later in the document. Therefore, the H1 will have a background of white. Usually, you won't add identical selectors in your CSS. However, the more complicated the document, the higher the chance of your rules conflicting with each other. So look at this. There is a paragraph tag, a descendant selector, paragraph, and then M. So you're selecting the M tag within a paragraph tag. And the font weight is bold. And then after that, you're selecting an M tag and saying font weight normal. So what you think would happen is that the M would be font weight normal because it is further down in the style sheet. Even though the single M came later in the document, its font weight will be bold, simply because the PM selector is more specific than the M alone. So the specificity calculator kind of looks like this. There's a way to calculate the specificity of a selector to see if it will take precedence over another. Here's an example, a graphical example. Inline styles, the ones that are styled directly in your HTML, the one that I said you shouldn't be doing, actually is given 1,000 points. So if you style something inline, it will pretty much always overtake any of the, it will take precedence over any other styles you create because it's directly in the HTML and it's given 1,000 points. It's given the highest priority. The ID, an ID selector, is given 100 points. Classes, attributes, and pseudo-classes are all given 10 points. And if you're styling just simple elements or pseudo-elements, they're given 1 point. So it goes from more specific to less specific. So for example, the H1 is just a single HTML element. Therefore, it is given a specificity of 1. The class of base or bass, depending on what you're looking at this as, is a specificity of 10 because it is a class selector. For example, if you were to select the ID of fish and then descend into a level 1 heading with the class of bass and then select the M tag within that, you would be given, this whole rule would be a specificity of 112 because an ID is given 100 points, an HTML element is given 1 point, a class is given 10 points, and an HTML element is given 1 point, which adds up to 112. If you declared this in your CSS, the ID of fish, H1 with the class of bass and background blue, and then below that you said ID of fish, and then you're selecting the class of bass within that, the background red, the first selector would actually win, and the background of the bass element would be blue because it has more points than the bottom selector, even though the second selector comes in this later in the style sheet. You could see that the first one has 111 points and the second has 110. Therefore, the first one is more specific. Here's a really cool resource on the web. It's called the Specificity Calculator, which allows you to type groups of selectors, and it will automatically calculate the specificity of each selector for you. Then you can sort by specificity to see which selector styles would be applied. So the URL is specificity.keegan.st, and this is what it looks like on the web. So you can go ahead and just say something like level 1 heading. You can see it's given 1 point because it's an element or a pseudo element. And you could say H1 with the class of bass. So now you're given 2 points. So this is one element. And now what if you were to say just this? You can easily see that this one would take precedence because it's more specific. It has 2 points. This has 1. What if you were to do something like this? This is 4 points. And then down here, if you were to select the M, it has 1 point. So obviously it wouldn't work. It wouldn't be as specific. Or if you were to say, this is 2 points rather than 4. So you can see how the specificity calculator works. And this is a really great way of seeing which CSS rule is going to be going to take precedence and show the style. And so it's important to know that there is something called CSS specificity, and CSS will actually calculate which CSS rule should be given precedence based simply on how many points these selectors add up to.